So with that, I'm going to turn things over to SBJ's VP of Creative Services and CEO of High Tide Communications. She will moderate the first segment this morning. Welcome, Mary Ellen.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome Titus Williams with Prosperity Partners, our presenting partner. Good morning, Titus.
Good morning.
And with us this morning also is Scott Tennyson. We're all neatly tucked away in our offices. Thanks for joining us this morning. Scott is with Legacy Bank, and he is an SBA lending expert. What we're going to be talking about is not only through this, we know that we have lost some well-established businesses, but we have also seen a business startup decline. Titus, new business licenses in the city of Springfield are at a 10-year low as of April and May and June. Year to date, new business license applications are down by 223 or 27% as compared to the same period last year. What could this portend for our community?
Well, you know, the lifeblood of our community and most communities across the U.S. and the economy of the U.S. is small business. Small businesses are our backbone. They generate I'm not even sure how much of a percentage of the GDP, but it's got to be a significant amount. So when you see the new business licenses actually declining in our community, it is a concern because, in my opinion, those businesses those new startup businesses are needed, just so that, you know, it can kind of fill in some of the businesses that are going to be exiting during this time.
Yeah, because not only are we dependent upon that backfill of replacement, but we like to grow as an economy, so it can be a bellwether. Also, Titus, if a budding entrepreneur has shelved their plans, because we can certainly understand why people would be trepidatious right now, how might they adapt under the current conditions?
Well, if they have shelved their plans, one thing that they potentially could do is actually see how the COVID has affected other businesses like theirs in this economy. It gives them an opportunity to then also see if there's an area that they can actually bolster their business plan. And during this period of time, with businesses potentially downsizing or changing to a different business model themselves, they might be selling different equipment or relocating, potentially changing staff or just refocusing. And because of that, it gives people that are potentially starting a new business to buy things at a potentially discount or potentially pick up some really good talent that might not have been available to them otherwise because the economy previously was so strong.
Right. Yeah, because we're seeing all sorts of changes in the workforce that we didn't see last year this time through economic development or growth survey. It's a very different talent pool right now. Good point. Scott, a big part of a startup business, we've talked about the expense, we've talked about the opportunity of real estate and equipment savings, but the reality is you have to start with capital too. And the Small Business Administration, you've worked with those programs for a long time, but a lot has changed in those programs to help kind of stimulate what's happening. Can you speak to a little bit about how they have adapted in light of current conditions to support business? What have they changed or created new? And then finally, to wrap it up, what should they be looking for in a lender? Because not every bank is created equal when it comes to SBA lending.
Absolutely. SBA has adapted, you know, they had administered in a 2-week period when all of this, because it all came very fast, SBA administered the CARES Act program, which allowed funding for the PPP loans and other additional loans, which assisted millions of small businesses. Kind of to start out, one of the really unsung heroes that didn't get a lot of credit was the 6 months of no payments that was provided by SBA. When this originally rolled out, SBA came out and said, all existing SBA borrowers, don't worry about your next 6 months of payments. We're going to pay your principal and interest payments. To me, that was real cash to those borrowers. That was a quick response to those borrowers, and they gave comfort to the borrowers as far as that's something they weren't having to stress about. In addition to that, they've actually expanded upon that, and any business that is coming and getting a loan, As long as that loan is fully funded by September the 27th, those loans will be able to participate in the 6 months of payments by SBA. So SBA will come in and make 6 months of their principal and interest payments.
And
On
what
top
was
of
that
that,
date?
then
What was that date again?
September the 27th of 2020.
Okay.
So the loan has to be fully funded at that point. Right behind that, on the heels of that, SBA came out with the EIDL program. EIDL program was a direct loan with the SBA for the borrowers. They could go online, as many small businesses did, and had to probably go online multiple times to try and fill out their application and get their EIDL proceeds. Along with that EIDL proceed came out with the EIDL advance funds, which was allowing $1,000 per employee. And basically that would be paid out in an advance payment outside of the loan, the EIDL loan. What the EIDL loan was or is, and it's still available, the advance funds have depleted. So they set aside a certain amount of funds for the advance funds, and those have depleted. I believe that was $20 billion that they set aside for that. The actual EIDL loan itself is still eligible, and you can go out and apply for that. What that loan is they're going to give you, you'll send in your financials, tell them kind of what's going on. The terms of that loan is 3.75% on interest for a 30-year payback period. And the first year, there's no principal, no interest payments due from the borrower, and there is no accruing interest on that as well. So, you know, if those borrowers are uncertain as to whether they need this and they don't know how long this, like many of us, don't know how long this is going to last, it's a very good benefit for them to be able to go out there and apply for that loan, get that loan, and if they don't need the funds within an 11-month period, you know, pay those funds back, and there's really no harm to the borrower. There's no additional interest or anything. Then there's the one we have all heard about, which is the PPP loan program. That program, the funding is still out there until August. There is still some additional funding out there for PPP loans. But, you know, kind of what we're going through on that is you'll still see some applications from that. Just want to let everybody know that that is still out there until August. But we're kind of going through the forgiveness piece on that as well at this point. There's not been a lot of information. There are some forgiveness applications out there for the borrowers to complete. But at this point, we cannot submit those to SBA as there's not an avenue to submit those. They're still trying to work through all the regulatory stuff of that. In the wakes of everything that's going on, SBA has also increased their express revolving line of credit, which is their revolving line of credit feature. Historically, the max on that has been $350,000. They have bumped that up to $1 million now. That bump is till December 31st of 2020. That program is a great program for people that are needing capital, needing to cover accounts receivable, that kind of stuff. So with them bumping that to $1 million, that's a huge asset. And that might not be something out there that these borrowers know about. I'll kind of touch to your point as far as what to be looking for as you're looking into SBA lenders. And I think the most important thing is make sure that lender is a delegated lender. With them being a delegated lender, that provides to that customer that they know that bank has the knowledge to be able to administer all of the programs that SBA has out there. SBA won't make a delegated lender. You have to make so many SBA loans to be deemed a delegated lender, or a PLP lender is what that's called. So that would be the most important thing I would stress to that borrower, is just make sure that who you're working with is a PLP lender and that they have the knowledge to be able to administer the programs and do it in a fashion that's a quick turnaround time, so that there's not a lot of stress on the borrower through that.
Yeah, because anecdotally, I've heard of companies that did not receive a PPP loan that probably qualified for one. There was but maybe they were working with lenders who just weren't familiar with the system.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Scott. That was, we learned a lot about what SBA is doing. Clearly, the federal government recognizes the importance of small business for the overall economy and certainly for our local economy. And Titus, I want to wrap up with, if you were to talk to somebody, you've started a lot of companies, you purchased companies, you have a lot of experience in the business world, mostly in real estate. But however, if a company is, or if individuals are a little gun shy right now, what advice might you have for them? And specifically, maybe in real estate, because a lot of businesses do require real estate.
Well, if they're a little gun shy right now, I mean, I think that's wise. Actually, they have a little bit of understanding that they need to get in place before they launch a new business during this period of time. What I would say is that they, in real estate specifically, what they would be wise for them to do is to potentially find locations that are potentially available from that are businesses that are similar in their industry. Like, for example, if it's a new startup restaurant, that they find a building that was originally, before their tenancy, was a restaurant. That way, the infill costs are reduced. Also, during this period of time, if they are wise, they are able to look for some pretty good deals. And one thing that's always important when a person is an entrepreneur and they're looking to start new businesses is that you need to have a good team around you. You need to have a good accountant. You need to have a good attorney. You need to have a good lender. For example, Scott, if you were to contact Scott can, because of all those different programs that he just mentioned, most entrepreneurs aren't going to know that. And if you were to able to have someone that you can go to that has that knowledge, he or she might be able to give you some advice that helps you become more successful quicker. And during this period of time, I think it is prudent for people to think kind of outside the box, think of some things that, because we have hit some time where it's not so clear in our economy, for people to actually really seek out those people that are knowledgeable in that type of business, that have some expertise, and entrepreneurs shouldn't do it alone, in my opinion. Every entrepreneur needs to have a good team around them.
Thank you so much, Titus. The saying I've heard is there is really no such thing as a solopreneur. They have a whole team of experts behind them, helping them make everything happen. Scott Tennyson with Legacy Bank, thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us insights on what SBA is doing. And Titus, thank you for your insights on startups and purchasing businesses. Appreciate you both. And now we're going to go back to the studio with Jennifer.
For the Great Game of Business. He will be providing a unique perspective on the nimble business plan. Darren brings this perspective both through his long-term tenure with Great Game of Business, but also through his own entrepreneurship. Please welcome Darren Bridges.
Darren, you are live.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and hopefully you can see my screen well enough. Is that true? So we're talking about nimble business planning, and specifically I'm going to be talking to you about contingencies this morning. When I think of nimbleness, I think of how do you plan for the unexpected. And I think the first step is to make sure that you're planning. And my experience of SRC, I think one of the most beneficial processes throughout our year is this annual planning process. It's something we do twice a year, every year. You can do it once a year, but just creating that habit of when you're looking at the next year, next 5 years, and what the marketplace is doing. Our annual planning process looks something like this. We look as sales and marketing template, which is primarily looking at the outside forces such as the economics, the industry trends, the competition. Then we put together a strategy for growth, basically built around our SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We turn that into a financial plan for the future year. And then we look at succession planning on how we make sure that we have the resources in place to carry out that plan. The part I'm going to be talking to you about today is in the sales and marketing piece. As mentioned earlier, when we do sales and marketing, we look at the outside information, economic, industry, market information. If you're in construction business, you might be looking at construction starts, residential, commercial. You might be looking at interest rates, home loans. You look at your competition to get an understanding of what they are doing. We get pretty detailed. We get down to even trying to understand the financials of our competition. The SWOT analysis, we take a hard, very honest look at yourselves. A lot of times we like to include customers and suppliers' perspectives on that. Then we look at our customer information and sales history. How have we been performing against plans so far this year? How we've performed in the past? And then we create our annual plan for the future. And that next comes in contingency, which is a bit unique for a lot of planning practices out there. But contingency planning is basically a proactive look at what ifs, all the what ifs that could be out hiding in the shadows, such as what if the assumptions, the market trends, assumptions, economic assumptions and such are wrong? What if your largest customer goes out of business? What if your competitors start coming after your accounts heavily or do start slashing prices? What if inflation hits? If you're in certain industries where you're using a lot of raw materials, government and legislation regulations. I know that has affected our business at SRC over the past 10 years with emission laws, supply chain disruptions like we've seen this year, and on and on. But to actually create a process around those what ifs, we have a tool that we use, and you can duplicate easily, is listing all the different opportunities that you could think of that build upon your strengths, take advantage of opportunities that may not be in your plan this year. Let's say they're not fully developed ideas, but something that you can list and then measure as how ready they are to be launched. So, for instance, in our tool, we look at the stage in development of an idea. Is it in the very early stages or is it basically ready to be launched? The ease of implementing it, the life cycle. Is it going to be just a short life cycle, a blip of opportunity for you to increase sales, or is it possibly something that could be longer term? How long will it take to get to market, essentially? That's what it means by real. By when, it's do you already have a market established? Do you have a customer? Does a customer have a PO he's ready to cut for you right now? Do you have an advantage over your competition, or are you just following suit? Is it going to require a lot of investment? And how much staff are you going to have to add in order to execute this idea? These are the kind of things that will help you gauge on, is it something you can win with right now? And then the worth. We like to look at our return on investment. Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Or is it 2 years? How much capital is required? And the last thing is, do you have a lot of support for it? So these are not subjective. We actually go through and grade each one of these with a small panel of people. So we can grade them as a sum total of each one of these items. And this is just a quick example. If you had an idea and let's say it's not quite ready for market, but it does have a long sales cycle. You do have a customer, let's say a customer is asking for it, it's just not ready for launch. You don't have a strong competitive advantage, but your customer is very loyal to you and would like to buy from you. And it falls right in line with things you do today. It doesn't require a lot of investment, doesn't require a lot of capital. And so with this example, it came with a total score of 49, we gave it a B. This is an example of a contingency slide we use in our planning. This one's a little old, but it was one we use at SRC. And please don't get caught up in the details, but essentially you'll see the different types of products on the left, types of customers we were targeting, what the product actually is, the size of opportunity. That's not down to the exact number, but it's just to give us a gauge of how big the opportunity is. And then the grade. So you'll see in this example, we activated a few of these contingencies already, but others were graded. Now here's the key thing. Some of these are graded as an A, which means if we needed to implement something, if that what if hit and something unexpected happened and we didn't think we were going to be able to hit our plan, we could activate these pretty quickly. Others have a pretty low grade, and some may ask, why do you keep them on there? Well, they actually improve their grade over time if you decide to keep them as a contingency. It's something that may not be terribly attractive today, but over the years, you may be developing your strengths, or you may be willing to invest in something as a skunk works to help create it into a higher grade. I'd like to give you a quick short story about one. You'll see on this slide a customer called Solaire. It was a whole good. The quick story is when SRC has historically been extremely strong at remanufacturing engines, engine components, and things of that nature for large OEMs all over the world. We had an OEM approach us several years ago that asked us not to remanufacture their engine, but their whole entire piece of equipment. This had a lot to do with the regulations I was telling you about, the EPA regulations. And they were struggling to meet emission rulings, so they wanted to have a reman offering. Otherwise, they're going to run out of product to sell. And this is the company Solaire. So we had never in our lives remanned anything quite like this before, where you're talking about body panels, axles, tires. We've dealt with primarily the components that make it run. When they first asked us to do this, we knew we had a customer, knew we had their support. We knew that we were highly likely to make some sales. We didn't know how much. We didn't realize how big this opportunity could be. We didn't know anything about the product line, but it started off with a grade, I'd say as D or maybe C at best. But through negotiations, we found out they were more than willing to help us develop this program. They were able to send us resources from their factory to our factory for that development. They were willing to allow us to start doing a skunk works and pay us for that, for any products we've generated out of this skunk works. When skunk works is basically research and development, and work with us as a partner until we could develop a standard cost or understand how much these things were going to cost. Could we be cost competitive with the market and determine what the market size was? What's beautiful about this contingency is it started off with us selling maybe 5 or 6 units the first year. At best, we paid $200,000. Today, this is over a $20 million piece of our business that resides in a factory over on East Kearney in the industrial park. It just goes to show, though, how it could have easily been set aside. This is not feasible at that moment, but because of our annual process, looking at it every year and constantly keeping it in front of us, I was able to develop into something of quite some size. But I think what a lot of people listening today are really interested in is about the black swan that we've been hit with this year. And a black swan is a term we use at SRC a lot. We define it as an unpredictable or unforeseen event. Came out of nowhere. Typically one with extreme consequences. It's quite significant. It is inappropriately rationalized afterwards. Everybody can look back with hindsight and say what they saw coming, could see coming. But in the moment, just like we were in March, no one quite knew what to expect. We've had several in recent history. Of course, there was a dot-com bubble, 9/11 attacks, the 2008 Great Recession, Brexit, and quite notably right now with the COVID-19. It hit our little business at a Great Game quite significantly. Before March 23rd, everything we did was in person, whether we were speaking and talking about the new books being published, whether we were holding workshops. They were in Springfield, Missouri, typically with a crowd full of people. We were doing trainings with different companies at their locations and coaching, where we were on site literally around the world, helping companies implement the Great Game. Everything was in person. As of March 23rd, we had to go 100% virtually. So training, speaking, coaching, all had to be offered virtually. We were fortunate. We were so fortunate because a lot of our other companies like ourselves did not have a virtual offering. And quite frankly, we did not either. But we had a lot of contingencies set up for a virtual offering. Why were we looking at virtual? Wasn't due to some type of pandemic, but it was very much due to the idea that we could reach an international audience with greater ease. We could reduce the customer cost to some degree. And we were looking at other just virtual platforms to really address the new demographics of the younger generation who's very used to operating this way. And so for us alone, and this is from this year, we activated a lot of items, and basically every one of them is related to providing virtual versus in person. And it ended up being about 36% of our plan for this year. And quite frankly, if we didn't have these items almost ready to go, it would have been a devastating year for us. But we were able to continue on, meet our clients, and we're still bringing on several new clients because we had this available. This is additional contingencies we have for the rest of the year, so it doesn't stop. We're constantly looking at what ifs and what we could offer next. You know, with SRC as a whole, we look at the different what ifs. And, you know, this is from a higher level. And we did this again also in 2008, 2009 with the Great Recession. And it sounds kind of brutal, but we call it DEFCON levels. And so DEFCON 1 to 5 is, you know, you just normal course of business. You're down a little bit, but you just continue on. You keep grinding it out. DEFCON 4 is you start looking at budget cuts. What capital expenditures did you have planned that you can set aside for a later date? We talked about cash flow early this year when COVID hit. What type of inventories can you reduce? Can you work with your suppliers for extended payment terms? Can you work with your customers for shorter payment terms and possibly offer some discounts? But it's all about cash flow. DEFCON 3, all right, this is where it gets tough. We look at salary, benefit reductions. It's when it hurts, but it's something that you have to be very pragmatic about. Then there's DEFCON 2. You start looking at divesting properties, such as real estate you own. I know we already understand exactly what our real estate properties are worth and how much we can borrow against them if necessary. It's that level. And then DEFCON 1 is when you start to divest business units, selling off different divisions or different portions of your business. This is all triggered by your debt levels. And I will say that we have tools that we use that will help you calculate how long your cash flow will last, and also looking at your lines of credit and when to start implementing or start looking at the different DEFCON levels. Fortunately, we've hit DEFCON 4. We have pushed off some of our capital expenditures. We have taken advantage of some of the government assistance programs that relate to DEFCON 3, but fortunately, we're still, operating and starting to see our customer schedules pick up as SRC is concerned. So getting back to the COVID planning, we trying to understand, when is this going to end? What should we expect for the future? We don't like speculation, so we went for data. One of the sources of our data is Wall Street Journal's Vistage polls. They survey small businesses. Now I'm talking about the great game of business. And basically 49% had, or half of them had up to 49% a reduction in revenue. We went to our customers. We asked 50 of our great game practitioners, clients, how were they impacted? Half of them were business to business, half of them were business to consumer, and about 32%, a little better than an average, but 32% were down significantly. But some, quite a few, 52% were up. And I will tell you, sometimes an upswing, an unexpected upswing, can be just as challenging as an unexpected downswing, especially if you do not have the resources in place. We've been through that before at SRC, and you're working your people overtime, you're working on weekends, and it can be just as exhausting. We reached, if you look at the Wall Street Journal's surveys, they saw a slight uptick in May. Have not seen the June reports yet. And then we asked our clients what they expect in the next 6-12 months. And about 41% think it's going to stay down, and another 41% think it's going to go up, and 14 are in the middle. So it's about 50-50, or a half up, half down. And this is what our clients are thinking, is 12% down and 66% up, a little more optimistic again. So, to bring this to a head is, when's the best time to plan for a crisis? And quite frankly, is when there is not one. Again, I go back to the first point. I implore people to try to take once a year to look at their plans. And as they put their plans together, think about these what ifs, because when you get inside of the crisis, when the emotions are high, it's hard to really think logically. And as you're constantly thinking of these things, it's something that you can just pull out. It sounds a little rudimentary, but I love to use the analogy of, you're going camping and you're going to have a campfire that night. So you got your kids with you, and you're going to be cooking on the campfire. So you take matches, and all of a sudden the matches somehow get wet. You can't get this match to light. It's good to have a contingency in case. And so you may bring flint strike and some tinder and bring those to the woods with you just in case something goes wrong with matches. And let's say for whatever reason the flint's not sparking. Well, it's good to have a backup Bic lighter as well. But that's the thought process. If you're out in the middle of the woods, the kids are cranky, you're cold, you're hungry, you're wet, what have you, it's not a good time to be thinking rationally. But if you've got these things ahead of time and you just immediately pull that out and be able to utilize it in a very proactive, pragmatic fashion, it will save you a lot of stress and, quite frankly, a lot of times save your business. So just a summary of what we've covered. Create an annual plan habit. Look at the outside forces as you're doing your planning. It is as important as anything. Understand what the market is doing, what trends are out there. None of us could foresee the COVID coming, but there are times that we see indicators with the marketplace, such as an inflated stock market or things of that nature, or interest rates, that you can somewhat get some indications to prepare for. Do a very honest evaluation of your business, your competencies, understand where your strengths are and what opportunities can be turned into contingencies. Look at your historical performance This is kind of your BS meter. Is how have you done in the past based upon these strengths and opportunities. Make a plan for the future, but this is this next step. Look at your contingencies, understand your what ifs, and then keep that list going every year and utilize this as also future targets for growth, things that you can grow, similar to the solar example I gave you. And so that is my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Darren. You've certainly given us a lot to think about and some valuable checklists for planning. As we prepare for the next segment, I want to remind you to continue to participate via pollev.com/JenniferJack977. And in this next segment, Mary Ellen Phelan will rejoin us for a special interview with our forum sponsor, Brian Majors of Brian Properties. Hold one moment for Brian Majors.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Mary. How are you?
Good, good. We've got a little bit of echo back and forth. We're in the SBJ annex. So I'm going to move a little bit so we don't have that feedback. Bear with me.
All right.
Brian, you've been in the multifamily and hotel industry for quite some time, and hopefully we can get rid of that echo now. There we go.
Yes.
I've moved into the editorial offices. You can see all of our glorious covers that we've had over the years. Brian, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And as you're very well aware with your hotel properties, travel and tourism took a significant hit early. And according to the second wave of the results of the Economic Growth Survey, respondents identified travel and tourism as the industry they expected to be hardest hit as a result of COVID. How and when did it affect your hotel properties?
Well, it was in the middle of March when it hit. And we had to close down completely our two properties in Branson, Missouri. So we just had nobody even thinking about coming down there during this time. The one that we had just opened, the True by Hilton, we kept that one open, and that one was doing okay, maybe 5-10 people a day during the period. And so we were in bad shape like everybody in the industry.
Yeah, and True is primarily for you, the Springfield True property is mostly a business traveler.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And yes.
And so the local industry took a downturn even before widespread shelter-in-place orders took effect. So that speaks to the consumer confidence and presumably their health and safety concerns. You have always, in the hotel industry, you've always had very, very stringent health protocols, cleaning protocols, but particularly your Hilton brands have really upped the game. Can you talk a little bit about what you've done to help talking about the business traveler, because a lot of business travelers, unlike us as individuals, don't have the option to opt out of travel always.
Correct. What we have seen is Hilton has what they call a clean stay program. And they've gone in with the Lysol company to improve the clean material itself. And they've also gone in with the Mayo Clinic, which they have an advisory board that is helping Hilton to upgrade their practices. And so that is the immediate effect. Now, in the hotel itself, there are about 9 or 10 things that Hilton has either continued or picked the game up. We, of course, distance, and everybody that works at the Hiltons always wear masks. And so those are a couple of things that we do. And then on a personal level, we try to encourage our staff and all our teammates to be optimistic. This is, we are just Springfield based. And so we take it kind of a day at a time and be upbeat. You know, I have been able to do that by turning my TV news off, because I don't care what happens in New York or Los Angeles, really. And I'm more concerned about our community. And so all the news that I'm interested in is right here with the Business Journal, local news, and it just has changed the attitude of our people. And so we just try to do that every day at the hotels.
And can you talk a little bit more about the partnership with the Mayo Clinic? I think that's very interesting that you've worked with infectious disease experts to help enhance and change your cleaning protocols.
Yes, and Marriott Company, for instance, they have teamed with the Cleveland Clinic for the same reason. I can't remember who the other large company has teamed with, but Mayo is really active in fighting this COVID, and any information, they're in cohorts with Hilton people. And I know that later in life, Baron Hilton gave a big sum to Mayo, around $30 million, to build a big wing of their hospital. So they have always been close, and Mayo has always been the go-to medical people that the Hilton Company has used. As far as the daily, well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was rambling on.
You're good. You're good. For the business traveler specifically, because as we discussed, you know, sometimes you have to maintain your livelihood and you have to travel, but that doesn't necessarily take away some of the health concerns. Just because you have to, you still have those concerns. So if I wanted to call ahead, let's say I had to travel to St. Louis or Chicago or anywhere, what are some of the questions I could call ahead to a hotel and ask to just give me some peace of mind that not only am I going to feel safer, but I actually am safer?
Well, yes, a couple new things. In other words, we do not go into the rooms at all once our guests have moved in. We don't go in with our cleaning people. They stay out of the rooms the whole time. When our guests move in, the room is spotless, and we seal that room by a little sticker on the outside of the door that shows that nobody has been in the room. And we're now using a new Lysol brand cleaner that is the latest brand that they've come out with. And instead of being at 60 whatever, it's at 70 now, which is the top cleaning ingredient. So we're real comfortable that we are turning in a clean as we can product. And our staff is well trained by the Hilton people. They make sure that everybody is on board, and we do the same. So you know, I would just tell them, come on down to Springfield. We are a good community that has really taken this virus seriously, and our hotel in particular is doing all they can to stay healthy.
And you expect some of these changes to remain even after we're out of the thick of the pandemic. What do you expect to stay?
Everything. I think that the distancing is just part of the mentality now of our country. I think that people that cough are just going to continue to be a sign that we need to distance even further. We at the Hilton, we watch the entryways where people come in and where people come together, and we try to help them come on into the hotel and don't gather in certain spots in the main room. We try to make sure everybody is spread out, and all of this will continue. What we are waiting for is to find out what the baby boomers are going to do. Our properties in Branson, for instance, the majority of the business is in the fall, and baby boomers are 90% of that business. And we do not know right now, I wish we did, whether they're going to come out in the fall and travel. But I think, obviously we'll find out in September if they are coming out. And that will also include the business traveler. Will they be coming out in the fall? So those parts are unknown in our industry. And so we're using patience, do the best we can with our customers right now. And we keep everything just on a daily basis and let the Hilton management worry about the people coming out, the baby boomers coming out and traveling.
Sure. And, that is a big part of this, because as we stated at the top of this, the survey showed that everybody who responded, a large percentage felt like your industry was going to be the hardest hit. And I think we're still seeing that bear out. Occupancies have recovered some, but you're still nowhere near your projections. So economically, as an industry, travel and tourism overall, not just the hotel specific, what are some of those conversations that are happening?
Well, we're just lucky that we have invested in the Ozarks, and a lot of the other owners are in difficult situations because they have overbuilt in their communities, and they haven't upgraded their quality of hotel. Springfield has. We have new hotels, clean hotels. It's just perfect for travelers. I go into other cities and I go, whoa, I'm glad I didn't invest here. So we just have to be grateful that we live here, and everything has a lot of positive things that we've done nothing about. It's just the good fortune to live here.
And you have talked to me about how the Convention and Visitors Bureau serves as a hub. Can you talk a little bit about how the industry works with the Convention and Visitors Bureau to help bring this economy back?
Yes. I have been active with the CVB, and Tracy Kimberlin, wow, he does a great job of communicating what our city needs to help with the tourism. He plans way in advance to book quality groups into our city, and it's been a struggle for him also. And but he continues to get all the information out to us about who's coming in, and that he's continuing to work to bring new people in, and continue to do what's happened a lot is, for instance, Columbia has built all these new basketball courts. Now they've got facilities to compete against us, where just a few years ago we had a monopoly on softball, basketball tournaments, things like that. And Tracy has encouraged the city to keep up with these other communities like Kansas City and Columbia who are slowly taking a lot of our tourists away. Since we only have one turf field, where Kansas City will have 16 now. So it's a continual struggle to keep our facilities up so that we can continue to attract the sports tourist.
And in light of this, you had some projects that you were planning on opening, and you've put those off a little bit.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have, and the banks have. So, yes, we were planning a couple locations, and we put everything on hold. And so we'll know when it's right to increase the number of rooms in a particular city that we're wanting to go into, but it's not now at all. And hopefully there's a cure, a vaccine that will come out any day, hopefully today, and that will completely turn everything around. And we're just waiting for that.
Yeah. And so coming back to the business traveler confidence, call ahead to your hotel. They can look for more detailed information in the next issue, printed issue of Springfield's Business Journal, of a checklist of items specifically to look for, like, is the door sealed so I can know that nobody's been in there before me? Are the remote controls resealed between each guest? How are you handling breakfast service? There's a whole list of checklist items that you can call ahead and just confirm that you're confident that the particular hotel that you're wanting to stay at is taking every precaution necessary. And particularly those major brands like yours that have partnered with major medical facilities.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Brian, and bringing some insights on travel and tourism. I know that we're all anxious to see how that recovers. It's a very important part of our economic driving system.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and we'll do fine. We'll do fine.
I like your spirit.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're going to go back to the studio with Jennifer.
Thanks, Mary Ellen, and thank you again, Brian Majors. As a leader of a media company and as a consumer of media myself, I can tell you how hungry we all are for some good news. In this next segment, editorial director Eric Olson is going to be talking to 3 leaders who have successfully made the changes that they need to make on the fly. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to introduce his panelists. Please welcome.
Well, good morning. I'm glad to be on this forum conversation, the panel discussion on businesses that pivot this morning. And it's my honor to be joined with Chasten Reynolds, the Senior Vice President of Marketing from Brightcore. Chasten, how are you this morning?
Very well. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.
And John Fugit, the owner and president of Imprint Graphics, is also with us. John, how are you? It's good to have you.
Yeah, doing well. Can you hear me?
Can hear you fine. Everything
okay.
Good on your end?
Yes, it's great.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'd like to, I'll mention this before we get started. We did have one other invite, and if he's able to join midstream here, we'll pop him into the conversation. And if not, we're good to go with you guys here. But as I think I want to start it with just looking at the year 2020 could be called many things right now. You'd probably agree, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're going to call it the year of the pivot. And I know in each of your businesses, there were some changes, and some minor tweaks, but then also some significant changes made as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions that rolled out after that for the safety of all of us. And I want to start by hearing just quickly your stories of changes that you had to make during that time. And maybe we'll stay with you, John, at Imprint. And when what were you and your company faced with in terms of making a pivot, or the decisions that you had to make, and how did you do that?
Well, obviously, several businesses were shut down, as everyone knows, and with our company, we basically tried to stay ahead of the curve, as everyone says, with COVID here. But one of the situations that we did is we basically gathered our team, and within basically about an hour, we had our own webpage built, where we were starting to sell magnetic signs and yard signs for businesses to say that their drive-throughs were still open for restaurants. Curbside pickups were open. We were doing magnetic signs for the drivers as they were delivering food to people's doors. That was a situation for us that we wanted to jump on immediately to be able to try to help businesses. It also helped drive revenue to our business, of course, which is the name of the game here, and helping, and you got to keep your business thriving as well. Another thing that we did was we grabbed our entire team, and I just told them, I said, hey, no option is off the table. So I said, any ideas that you may have, we're open. And ideas started flooding. So we started just opening all kinds of avenues and revenues, and got into the face shield business, as some of you have seen. And we ended up just started reaching out basically to large companies. And we've always never been afraid of that. So we started reaching out to several hospitals. I think we ended up helping Cox Hospital and Mercy with close to 5,000 or 6,000 face shields. And then we connected with Bayer Pharmaceutical and sold them a little over 100,000 face shields. So it was a good pivot for us. I'll say that.
Yeah. I want to follow up with some questions on those changes you made, but let's hear from Cheston and Brightcore on how the pandemic affected your business and the pivots that were made there.
Yeah, so we're a software company, and we sell to property casualty insurers. And for us, a lot of the interactions that we have with these companies early on are through traditional methods. And the big pivot came when all of the events started shutting down across the nation, because we sell across all the different states. And our primary channel for interacting and generating leads into the company was completely terminated by the virus. So we made a huge pivot to move all of our marketing strategy online, which was kind of interesting because there's a stark contrast. We're a very modern web-based company, but we've always done business really traditionally with some of these companies on channels where we're most likely to engage. So for us, it was a total revamp of all the interactions that we've done. So we kind of went through a process of, a full-on needs assessment with our staff. We had to perform a lot of research and analysis. We had to pivot our content strategy. We had to make strategic partners in the community and externally to get everything accelerated and online. And then we've kind of hit this execution and testing phase where we're rolling out all the changes that we've made over the last 5 months.
I think there's probably revenue implications for both of your companies. I want to circle back to that. But first, welcome Rob Levins of the Discovery Center. Rob, it's so good to see you here this morning. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Well, yeah, so glad you are here with us, and you're joining as we're kind of given the short story of pivots made at each company, and perfect timing to hear what happened at Discovery Center when in your situation it is probably one of the more significant changes, going from a children's museum and science center, and then tell us how you arrived at taking care of healthcare workers' children.
So the short story would be the coronavirus changes us all and changes our operations. And so what happened was, in looking at this pretty far out, we started looking at contingency planning before it had become widespread in Washington and communicated in the United States. And then we watched what happened in Washington, and we had Washington State, and had a lot of examples to look at of how science centers or cultural institutions there, community assets, were adapting given the different restrictions from the health department and in looking at spread. Before any of that happened, we started implementing more stringent sanitizing protocols, using cleaners that we believed would kill the coronavirus, implemented the science of germs and hand washing as something that we offered to families, mandatory hand washing. We created an exhibit at the beginning called the Science of Fevers, and used our thermal camera to get an extra look at individuals coming into the center. And then eventually the numbers that were being restricted by the health department came down to the point where, as part of our conversations with the health department, they said, or I had asked, when do we need to close to the public to send a message of safety and to talk about, our role as a science center? And they were worried about us closing because they weren't sure where the kids were going to go when schools shut down. And they had been watching in a community in Washington where they'd lost their a good chunk of their healthcare workers because of the schools shutting down. And so I said, well, we do summer camps already. We have quite a bit of experience with caring for kids. We have a lot of space, and when we do have to shut down, we'll have even more space. So we could potentially take on a lot of these kids for these healthcare workers. And then the schools did shut down, and we had about 5 days to become a licensed emergency child care center. The first week we took in about 100 kids. Since then, we've served over 100,000 hours of free child care. Our model was going 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. to mirror what the healthcare community was used to getting for childcare with their shifts. We've served over 40,000 free meals and over 1,000 child enrollments through that.
It's pretty amazing. Those numbers are impressive and obviously much needed in our community. Each of you has basically rolled out a new product during this time. Different types of products, of course, but I wonder about the revenue impact there. There must have been an immediate loss in revenue. How long did that go on for you, and what was the consequence of it before you were able to recoup that through these other product lines that you were able to roll out?
I'd say for us, obviously, like you said, it was pretty immediate. Luckily we are mostly wholesale, so we sell all over the country, and so it impacted us a little bit quicker, just because other larger cities were shutting down that we sell to. But luckily we had several projects in the books basically ready to go, so we started closing some of those, which helped. But I think, like you said, I can't imagine any business saying that it did not impact them financially, and we're seeing our sales are definitely down. We're coming back and bouncing back strong. Obviously the face shield, deal, like we said, we sold several, 100,000 of them, and that was a great revenue stream. But we knew that was going to be temporary. So it was something that you've got to look and basically tell your team, hey, we've got to look at the future here and make sure that we're going to sustain. And so far we have. I mean, the positive thing, I guess, for us that I've seen, and maybe others have seen this as well, but being in direct business to business that we deal with, once basically Springfield and everyone started to kind of open back up, I mean, it was like the floodgates opened, and that was very positive to see for me, that a lot of business just took off. And I mean, we really got busy for at least a month or so there, just right after everyone opened, because everybody was getting stuff going and just really coming back strong. So I think we're going to see a good economic, in Springfield. I always tell people it's almost like a little bit of a bubble here. We seem to see things a little bit last year, and we noticed that where parts of the country are suffering and slow, but Springfield's still thriving and going. And we do a lot of construction signage and things. And I mean, we've got several projects, and I know the construction guys right now are just slammed in commercial property, which is great to see. So that always tells us, it's kind of the pulse, the heartbeat pulse, in my opinion, of a community, is if commercial real estate is booming, the community is going, and Springfield is fortunate in that. So.
Yeah, thank you. We also expect to see a lot of interest peak. We're a little bit slower to get there. We manage daily operations of insurance companies, and so they're serving everyday people like you and me by predicting, preventing, mitigating risks, and then recovering from accidents and disasters. And so for the first 3 months, we were servicing all of the insurance companies that we do business with on a regular basis to make sure they had everything they needed to respond quickly to the environmental circumstances. For us, what happened was that, even the insurance companies, as robust as their disaster recovery and business continuity plans were, some of them still really were impacted by the virus. And there were varying degrees of disruption in these organizations. Those operating on outdated technology or more traditional business models struggled to adapt and implement and adhere to regulations as quickly as they needed to. And by contrast, our clients remained quite resilient. Part of that was because we're a fully web-based system. We have a lot of experience in remote work and managing implementations and support collaboratively. So there was tremendous opportunity for us to connect with these companies who are unable to respond to those changes in the environment. So what the process looked to connect with those individuals and bring that up to speed required us to kind of rethink the way that we have brought those companies on board in the past. And so for about 3 months, I would say our revenue stalled and customer retention was really high while we were working through those. And then we've started seeing momentum from the investments that we've made in the different areas that we're starting to bring everything digitally.
Yeah, so recouping those revenues for Brightcore meant transitioning to virtual connections and presentations to clients. And are you able to also do that? Because your model before was, going to a trade show, setting up a booth, and then having all kinds of potential clients walk by. How are you tapping into those potential clients now when it's more of the direct, virtual model?
Yeah, so we actually had to run a whole bunch of different projects in parallel. We started with making sure that we did an assessment. We did a lot of shuffling of staff. We had staff who would work events, and so I had to eliminate some positions, create new positions totally from scratch, positions that had never existed in our company before. Then we used the STEEP model to kind of evaluate all the external factors that might be impacting our clients and prospects so that the messaging that we would get from the scenario planning exercises could help us frame our content so that we were supportive, but also empathetic to what was going on in our community and communities that were outside of Missouri and the states that we conduct business. Then, we formed some really strategic partnerships. We connected with a firm that could do an outreach initiative that would allow us to stay in front of our prospects and advisors while we were building the digital strategy. So this helped build our sales pipeline with customers who were feeling like they had a more critical need. So we could kind of prioritize with our sales team the insurance companies that were in most need of new technology. And then we also partnered with Hook, which is a local creative studio, to accelerate all of our digital marketing. And some of you may know Hook through their product company, Big Blanket. And they've been very successful. They've generated, I think, about $10 million in the last 2 years. And so we felt like their experience as both a product company and a creative studio put them in a really unique position where they could very intimately and really quickly understand the power of like intentional branding and marketing for us. And so they've been instrumental in helping us conceptualize and execute on campaignable ideas, which have allowed us to really expand our digital footprint across multiple channels rather than just the one for trade shows. So in the end, we've actually been a lot more efficient and able to scale our marketing efforts really quickly as opposed to just going to the events.
As we're chatting, there's a word cloud on our screen with our audience answering the question, what word comes to mind for how you feel about changing your business plan, your business model? Hopeful is the biggest word right now, and of course these are changing as audience members are answering, but innovation, which is what you were just speaking to, Justin. Nervous, anxiety, stretched are some of the other keywords there.
We felt all of those things.
Yeah, I see all three of you nodding your heads at that. Exhausting is another one that just popped in.
Well, like we've told our team, even we said nobody hands an owner or a leader or anybody, nobody hands you a handbook and says, hey, here's a crisis and here's how to handle it. No one hands you that handbook, and I feel that it's been great to see a lot of people in this country and in this community even rise up to the occasion and really just make it happen. To me, that's very inspiring to see other business leaders and other people basically doing that and saying, hey, we're going to jump out and get with it. And now's the time to basically, kind of just get with it. I mean, you've got to innovate, like you said, and that fear obviously sets in and the stress sets in, and all of us feel that here, if you're in business or if you're an owner or if you're a leader, you're going to feel that weight. But I think the biggest thing is just for us, it's been being honest with our team and saying, hey, here's the honest, true numbers. We've even shared some financial numbers with our team and said, here's the real numbers. Here's what we're doing, and here's how we're going to get there. And we need all of you to do it, not just us, because nobody can carry that weight by themselves. So I think it's been important for us to say we've all got to row this boat together here. And it's for us, it's really made our team come together a lot closer and be more engaged. And I've seen that as a kind of a positive. If anything, you could say composite out of this, I would say that's a positivity that we've seen in our company, is our team has really banded together well, and it's been a great experience there.
And on the flip side, I think it might be helpful for our audience to hear what went wrong for you guys when you went through this process. And there's a lot of challenges there. You each talked about communication with the team. I heard that from each of you as being pretty critical, but that doesn't mean it's a smooth transition and everybody just jumps right on board. So maybe it's that, maybe it's, in the product roll up, but what actually went wrong for you guys? What were the lessons that you learned from that?
We practice an open culture. So we do practice open book financial management, where we do share the numbers with the team and they have direct impacts on those and ownership of lines. And we've been doing that through the Great Game of Business. And we've recently also implemented the counterpoint to that, which is open book project management, and doing that through an Agile and Scrum sort of framework, which is what made that quick transition possible for us. But what can go wrong in an open culture? During a team meeting, we had somebody bring up a pretty significant grievance that they were having that was more emotionally driven than anything else. But when you have a daily stand-up meetings where everybody gets a chance to speak and go around the room and say what's going on with them so you can solve problems quickly, you have to solve problems. And so it became a public problem that shouldn't have been, and something that we had to deal with the aftermath with other employees that felt uncomfortable that they had brought this up, as well as the person that was upset. And so you can get a tremendous amount of work done efficiently without stoppage when you can eliminate problems quickly, but you have to have the ability and the willingness to deal with problems.
Yeah, I think I would say that you have to be careful not to let inertia become your enemy. If you're not able or if you're not willing to change really quickly when you need to, then I think that can impede your own progress. And I think fostering a culture inside your organization where people are really responsive and, band together, especially in a time like this, it's really important. So I'm really grateful that our organization, places a high value on honesty and transparency, because it made the decision process so much easier for us to get together, decide on a plan and actually execute on the plan. I know that for some of the companies that we've talked to in the insurance space, that hasn't been the case for them. They were either limited by technology or by their culture, and they weren't able to pivot as quickly. And so I think that one of the things that I'm glad that we did, that I think everyone, listening has the opportunity to do, is to reach out to the community. I was really just astonished by how much support and how eager everyone that I talked to was, looking forward to helping us in any area that they could provide assistance. So I would say, ask the questions, reach out to your networks, listen to what they've done, and see how you can use it too, because we are a community, and that's what a community is for.
I'll tell you something that we did, which might be rare, I don't know, but we, again, we're in a little bit different position maybe than others because we do wholesale, but they are still considered some competitors. But one of the things I did is I had reached out to 2 or 3 sign companies here locally and guys that are big hitters like us in Springfield, and just asked them what they were doing. And some people get a little weird about that because they think, well, why are you calling your competitor? But the good thing is we've actually got some great working relationships. And what was cool was, I'll just name one, was Pinnacle Sign. Darren Pierce, he was phenomenal. And me and him have had a great relationship in the years. And he was sharing the forms that he had sent over to us saying, hey, here's some forms that we're using with our team as they're doing installs. Because, we were doing installations and we're saying, well, are we supposed to be, shut down, or are we considered a critical business or not? And so it was a situation we found out that we were, as far as a crucial type business and doing signage for hospitals and masks and that type of thing. But it was good to be able to, talk with your competitors a little bit and say, hey, what are you doing? And here's what we're doing. And, because we're all in this together and we all want to survive. And in a situation, in a crisis like this, I think it's good that you're able to do that. But you'd be surprised sometimes. I think people are scared to do that maybe sometimes, but it was great for us, man. I mean, I'm telling you, I talked to 2 or 3 of them around town, and we were all bouncing ideas around with each other and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. And they were saying, that's what we're doing. And it worked out really well for both of our teams. So it was great.
Fear is a big factor in a crisis. And I think I hear you saying, don't fear the competitors.
That's right.
What else culturally has changed? Has it changed your organization? It seems like the way you talked, it has, but that's sort of, John, that's sort of the outward looking approach there, but inward, with your teams, how has this process and these pivots changed your culture?
Man, it's hard to say, I guess, because we've had such a great team, and we do kind of like the Discovery Center. We do similar, not quite the great game of business, but we do an open book type deal, and we do a profit sharing situation with our team where we say whatever profits are left over, everyone bonuses, and we pay every quarter in that. And so we've got a pretty close knit team, and I can tell you, for myself, there were a couple moments there when during the shutdown and everything else that, I got pretty emotional. I mean, I've owned this business 25 years and I started it literally as a senior in high school. And so I've been doing this since I was 18 years old, and I built this company up to where it is. And it's a great company. And it's kind of like you nourish this. And I've told my wife, I said, this company is basically my baby. I mean, I've got 2 kids, but I think everyone can feel that sometimes. And I'm like, man, you go into protection mode, like someone's trying to harm my kid, and I've got 2 kids. And so that resonates, and I'm a fighter, and I'm one of those that I don't like to go down. And there were a couple times that I had to address my team and say, guys, and girls, I don't know exactly where we're going to land, but I can promise you will all be employed some way, somehow. And that was about all I could give them at the time. And it was some emotionals, I mean, we had some tears and cheers and all kinds of stuff happening in this office. And I think everybody can agree when you say, it felt like our team here has kind of even laughed and said, man, it felt like we've lived about a year and about 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, it was, for a while there, things were changing so fast that it was like you were just, your head was spinning. It was like, okay, we'll go this way. Well, no, now we've got to go right. Well, no, now we're going left. Well, no, now what are we even doing? I mean, I think everybody, sometimes no one wants to admit that, but I'm the kind of guy that I say, you know what, I don't do it all together. Nobody does. And you try to do your best. And we've, we've built a great company here, and luckily we've had a foundation here, and that's been stable. But our culture, man, has been great. I mean, it really has. We only ended up losing one person through the whole deal. And that was just because they took another position, and they didn't want to, but it was a better opportunity for them. And we still are intact with them today. And we just had lunch with them not too long ago, and it was great. But I think our culture's been good, man. And it seems like Springfield's been a pretty positive community, and it's why we basically love living here and raising our kids here. So it's a great place to be.
As we're winding down on our time here, I'll invite the audience to ask questions of you guys. Anything from the discussion that prompted your curiosity, or make a statement of a pivot in your own businesses, please do so at the chat function on the webcast. You can raise your hand there, just click that button, and we'll get that question answered in just a minute if you have any. One of my last thoughts would be on what's next, and is this what you've gone through and learned, and how the team has adapted and developed at this point? Does that change your business planning approach from here? How's that affecting? We just heard a presentation from you guys mentioning the great game of business a couple of times. Darren Bridges did a great job of presenting on how to, what is an nimble business plan, how to factor in your contingencies. But he said, don't plan during the crisis. That's the worst time. The best time is to plan when waters are calm. So right now, maybe you're not digging into that, but what do you think about when you have to acknowledge that there's going to be another crisis, there's going to be some other pivots in your businesses? How is that changing for you?
Rob, I'm curious to hear what's coming next for you all.
Well, we actually have done a bit of planning. So the way I kind of look at things like this, I had 10 years in the restaurant world. And so you might get completely slammed out the door, sort of rush, waits for hours for people. I've worked in a lot of really busy restaurants, both on the Landing and here locally, and helping open up the Freddy's here in Springfield. You have to look ahead even during the fray. And so we have been looking ahead. We're toying with the possibility, and by toying with, we're building out some infrastructure to possibly open up our own private school this fall that would implement a lot of those safety procedures that we've practiced and I wouldn't say perfected, because there's always things to improve, but using those to open up a STEM school for more ages at a private level, perhaps as a way of keeping some salaries going to where we don't have to make any layoffs. We brought on 25 additional people. We doubled the size of our staff to make all of this possible and to keep their position. So before I was worried about less people, and now I'm worried about more people and how to keep their jobs. So very much looking at that. We also have a new exhibit that we're working on. It's in the very early phases, and we'll hopefully be able to announce that in the next couple of weeks, that we intend to become a national touring exhibit that I think is going to pique a lot of people's interest and draw in visitors. I don't expect that we're going to be able to maintain the same level of operations that we have in the past. We were known for putting on once a month a very big event that would draw in over 1,000 people, to whether that's Sioux Science Day, lab coats and tiaras, or Bubble Fest, or events like that. And we're going to have to do them, but we're going to have to spread them out over several days. We're going to have to just change the way we're doing things to keep doing what we're doing. So I've used this comparison in another panel I was on, and I think it really resonates with people, but we're not going to keep watering the lawn in the rain. When it's raining, you don't water the lawn. If it's not working, if it's not doing anything, you stop. And so we're stopping the things that don't work. We're a science center, and so we focus a lot on the scientific method. And so it's good to fail. It's good to figure out what doesn't work so that you can go on to the next thing. And that's really our model, is trying out a bunch of different stuff, and we'll see what sticks.
I think that's where we're at too. I think it's there are going to be some lasting effects of where we're at today, and it's going to fundamentally change the way that we do business. But I'm really excited to see what that looks like in the future, because I think it's going to open up a lot of new opportunities, and I think there's potential in here for us to really connect with the companies that we can help the most. And so I'm hopeful that the good things come out of more mature and scalable processes for us.
Yeah, especially being in the tech space, it seems like your world, there's huge potential for new products. I mean, what we're doing right here virtually is a perfect example. Couldn't get everybody in the room together for safety concerns, but still being more efficient and productive. And so anything on the horizon that you could see in the insurance, maybe even just as a more broad,
Yeah.
changes or product lines there?
I think that we're hitting a real tipping point where, insurance companies have been, by nature, just really risk averse. And so they're kind of slow to adopt new technologies sometimes. Not all insurance companies are that way. I certainly don't want to paint that picture. There's a lot of innovation happening in insurance. But I think that this will hopefully accelerate them as well and start to get them thinking about different ways of doing business that would be advantageous to the customers. And so I think that there will probably be a lot of developments that where insurance companies work, alongside with technology to better enable the user experience. So I know there's, we're building out new platforms for new line of business support we currently, service companies for homeowners, farm owners, liability. We're building out auto support this fall. So that will, really expand the customers that we can enable. But in terms of innovation, just across the insurance industry as a whole, I think we're looking at a lot of predictive analytics, where, we can notify consumers prior to an accident or a disaster so that we can keep them safe. There's a lot in the way of working with auto companies and trying to figure out how to, make sure that everyone's safe in the vehicle and any sort of predictive measures there, and better discounts for drivers, based on their driving behavior. So there's really endless possibilities there on where that could go. And I hope that this really makes the whole industry just acceptive to, what could come and helps them try new things.
Yeah, I'd love to see the day when those predictive analytics tell me when the next hailstorm is coming my way and I can get the car home in the garage.
We still get caught in those big golf ball size hailstorms.
Oh man, it's bad this spring, but
definitely.
Well, I don't see any audience questions. I think you guys covered all the bases then, and I want to be respectful of our time, your time, and our next session to wrap up our forum this morning. So Chasten, John, Rob, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your pivot stories. And I think there's a lot that can be learned, and hopefully you make connections with our audience too. This is the Business Journal is a key component of what we do is connect other businesses. So as you guys spoke to that fact, as you went through the process this year, I hope that these types of conversations can do the same for you as we move forward together as a business community. So appreciate each of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll throw it back to Jennifer Jackson, publisher of the Business Journal.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you again to our panelists. As I listen to their stories of success and change, it's difficult not to also hear the human toll that change takes. And we also saw that from our poll respondents. The anxiety and fear sometimes that is a byproduct of rapid change. So it's fitting that in our final segment this morning, we'll talk about what we have been warned is the coming pandemic of mental health crisis. I want to welcome features editor Christine Temple, who will be interviewing president of Mostly Serious. Please welcome Christine and Jared Johnson.
So thank you so much for joining us this morning, Jared.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. Just talking about how I loved your background and your cup, sporting some Springfield flag on your mug.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So in this final segment this morning, we're talking mental health and the workplace. And, if you hadn't thought about this before as an employer, you're probably thinking about it now. As many health experts have said, that even for those of us who maybe didn't experience mental health challenges pre-pandemic, that anxiety can be something that many of us experience during these uncertain times. So C.J. Davis of Burrell actually termed it the A of COVID, anxiety COVID. So let's talk about Mostly Serious and how you guys have embraced mental health into your workplace. You started the company 10 years ago out of your spare bedroom. And I doubt that this was like on top of mind at that moment, but now you're 12 employees, you're on pace for $1.7 million in revenue in 2020. So you've said that the kind of two measures of success that you look at Mostly Serious are profitability and employee happiness. So pre-pandemic, how did you address the latter with your mental health policies and your culture?
Yeah. So it actually was kind of a focus from the beginning of the company, because we knew the type of agency we wanted to build would have to attract and keep the best people. And so we knew that part of this was we had to figure out how to take care of those people and build processes and procedures. And so we've always kind of had experiments around how can we make this work? How can we keep people fulfilled and aligned, which is really kind of what we figured out happiness is generated from. And so some of those experiments, too, that we've refined over the years is a flexible work schedule. So we would say in the early days, we're hiring adults, just be an adult. Turns out that's a lot harder to do than it is to say. So we expect people to work when they're most productive. We don't tell them when to work. And what we ended up having to do is be, Spencer Harris, our director of operations, likes to say, we are inflexible on a few things so that we can be flexible on most things. And so, showing up to meetings on time and Mostly Serious, we have a sensitivity around hitting deadlines because a lot of digital companies don't hit deadlines. Those types of things we're just inflexible about. And so that's allowed us to, by being so clear about the expectations, it's allowed us to give people the flexibility to go be with their families or take time off, leave in the middle of the day to go watch a movie if they want to, and pick up later in the day. So that flexibility has been huge for allowing people to live the life that they want to live. And we also have an unlimited vacation policy, which we ran into some hurdles with early on. There are some studies from larger Silicon Valley companies that have done this, where employees actually take less time off in an unlimited vacation policy, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But then you think about the social pressures of taking vacation. And if you've got a lot of work on your plate and so does your teammate, it's hard to just leave them. But when you have a set, 2-3 weeks a year, you're more likely to take that time and cash it in. And so for a while, we actually enforced a minimum vacation where you had to take vacation time. And since we've just gotten to where we're very clear, we push people when they're too busy and make them think about vacations. But largely, it's just built into our culture at this point that the expectation is we need you to go reset so that you can be more productive, which we also understand there's a lot of data behind. Overworked people are just less profitable for a business. And so we've worked to, going back to this kind of fulfillment and alignment idea, we've worked to build out a lot of systems in the company to support this. We have core values. We have 6 core values that we use as kind of our guiding star. And I know a lot of companies do that. We take them very, very seriously and use them every day, reference them all the time. And then we actually found that it was hard to make specific decisions using those core values. And so we built a layer beneath that we call principles, and we have 4 main categories. And those instruct you on how to make decisions on behalf of the company. And so right there, we have 2 huge tools on the alignment aspect. Are you moving in the same direction as the company? And then we have a set of goal systems that goes from the top level of the company all the way down to individuals, where everybody's setting goals that tie together. It's a popular system, the OKR model. If you want to Google it and look into it, then we're implementing some changes there. It's kind of a constant evolution. And then lastly, around this idea of maintaining happiness and alignment, we have a robust check-in system that we use, where employees, are graded against their job responsibilities, but also those goals that we've set out to accomplish and that they've set out to accomplish. And so all of this tied together pre-pandemic, and I think helped a lot afterward, to create a culture where expectations are very clear. And if you don't fit and you are unhappy, ideally it's because there's a misalignment and that person probably shouldn't work here anymore, and that's okay. There's a different job that probably fits them better. So part of that happiness is just being okay with this just isn't the right fit.
So, then COVID-19 hit and all our best laid plans. But, how did you shift to creating this culture of supporting mental health to a virtual format? And then what was the shift like for you? Because you have all these check-ins in place for your team, but you're the leader. Kind of how are you supported?
Yeah. Well, when we switched, we went remote. We actually had a week of kind of padding. The first cases that came through Missouri, we decided that we were going to need to think about how to move forward. And so we made 1 week optional when the first cases started to come in Missouri. And then coming out of that, we realized this really has to be mandatory. We need to just go remote. And so that week padding helped a lot though, because we were able to tell clients, we may need to do Zoom moving forward. We don't know what the future looks like. But then after we got remote, me personally, I was on vacation that first week, which turned out not to be a vacation at all because, the world was kind of crumbling at the moment. But my own transition there from having a set routine that every day I had, I'd wake up and I'd get up before anyone else and get into the office, and that was kind of my quiet time to work, and people would show up and I would have the interaction with other people. And then all of that routine just goes away. And the interaction with other people goes away. And I definitely, looking back, at the time it was hard to see, but looking back, I was definitely depressed and fell into, I just wasn't myself. I was down. I wasn't leading the company as effectively as I should be. And it took a couple people in my life saying, what's up? What's going on? What do you need to do here? And that really jarred me to realize that we had to change some aspects of the company. And at that point, a lot of other leaders in the company had started to implement some policies and changes that took hold. And we were all able to get together and really figure out how to improve the company while maintaining some of those things we had built. So to give you some idea of our response, you had mentioned CJ Davis, and he was the first person I saw talking about physical distancing doesn't mean social distancing. And we really latched onto that. It was just a great way to view this. And so we started scheduling optional Zoom lunches where, twice a week people could hop on Zoom, we could all eat together, we could catch up on what's happening and get some of that interaction that we had just abruptly lost with our peers and our coworkers that wasn't just text-based over email or Slack or whatever it might be. And then we started to do some structured and unstructured happy hours, show up, have a drink, talk about the week, talk about some of the wins you've had or a really difficult experience that you had that week. Just time to relax and chat and remember what it's like to be in a room together or as close as we can be. We also did a lot of events every year. We would do this big Olympics thing that's overblown and really cheesy, but we'd start with bowling and then we'd do a scavenger hunt or an office thing, and then we'd end at a patio and have a few drinks together. And we realized obviously we weren't going to do that, but we didn't give up on it. And we have a committee in Mostly Serious that's in charge of these types of events and fun things. And they just moved the entire thing online. So we went and had, these online tools we used to collaborate on some online games. And then they built an entire scavenger hunt, but it was in your house. So go grab a spoon and a piece of grass and something else, and then get back as fast as you can. So we adapted that. We kept those games. You would think it was weird, but it wasn't. It was just kind of this fun, exciting thing. And then we started implementing. Every Monday morning, we all talk about what we're most excited about for that week. And then at the end of the week, we talk about wins for that week. And Spencer had this great idea to include a mental health win along with your company win. And so every week people would talk about what they've done for themselves that have allowed them to stay healthy mentally and physically. And it was a lot of things, exercise, getting away from your computer for an afternoon and reading a book. Enjoying the weather one day instead of staying inside and finding a way to just try to protect your mental health, because we can't expect people to work the same now as they were during the pandemic. And I think any employer that expects that is just being unrealistic.
So, if we look at your revenue comparing 2019 to 2020 with the same staff of 12, you said that it's gone from 1.25 million in 2019, and you're on pace for 1.7 million this year. So even with the pandemic. So, sorry, there went away for a second. I'm back. So even in the middle of the pandemic, if you're talking about profitability and happiness kind of being those drivers of success, does that lead to your why? I mean, do you find that supporting mental health and putting that as a key does drive your profitability?
Yeah, I definitely, yes, it's absolutely a contributor to profitability. It also helps that we're a technology company. You know, the underpinning of, we also do marketing and a lot of creative services, but the underpinning of our company was started with technology in mind. And so as people are thinking about how to pivot to remote and not accessing people directly, we're obviously a go-to for a lot of companies. And so, you know, I saw in the Great Game of Business presentation that a lot of companies are excelling right now in terms of revenue, and that's exciting to see. And I think we've been very lucky there. In terms of profitability, I always go back to this, and I've seen articles that say I'm wrong about this, so I'm going to say the legend that I've heard. But Henry Ford kind of spearheaded the 40-hour work week in the 1920s, and the legend I've heard is that when asked about it, he made clear that it wasn't to protect the mental health or well-being of his employees. It was just more profitable. And I think looking at it through that lens, you know, we're talking about humans here, and my belief is that humans deserve to be healthy mentally and physically, and we should support that as a business community. In terms of just the profit angle, it just makes sense to look at things this way and run these experiments. And I know it's counterintuitive, but if you're making more money at 35 hours a week than you were at 40 hours a week, it just makes sense as a business to embrace that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when we talk about lost productivity, the World Health Organization and numerous other studies say that depression and anxiety costs about $1 trillion a year globally in lost productivity. So what do you think, you know, if you were not putting this at the forefront, like what's the cost to not putting employees first? Do you think you'd have challenges with retaining employees, with gaining new clients? I mean, what's the cost?
Yeah, absolutely. Turnover is super expensive. And I've learned this more recently, and it just shocked me. You know, the cost of replacing an employee is between 1/2 and 2 times their salary. And, you know, the statistics say that might even be pretty modest. And so you think about, you know, you're paying somebody new their salary, and then you're paying 2 times their salary to replace them. Turnover cost is just astronomical when compared to how do we keep people engaged, fulfilled, and aligned with the business. And so when you look at it from that vantage point, we're a smaller company, but as you scale, as you add employees, that cost can just go up so much. And then on the flip side of that, you know, you mentioned attracting great talent. If you want great talent, be known for taking care of people. When we put out job postings, we get a lot of resumes, and we get a lot of resumes from great people. And the number one thing I see them say is Mostly Serious. They've heard through the community or through friends or friends of friends that Mostly Serious is a great place to work. And when you have that reputation, people want to reach out, they want to work with you. And we explained in the interview process, yes, we're a great place to work. Let's talk about this alignment and this idea that it's not easy to maintain being a great place to work. And we found that people either latch onto that idea or they say, no, that sounds like a little too much. That's not really what I'm looking for.
Related to kind of that anxiety side of things, you know, as an employee, that can come with not enough communication, not knowing what the plan is. You know, you said that you guys are going to stay closed. You're remaining closed until you know more. I mean, the situation has not changed. So, you know, talk about that commitment. That's a big commitment. Yeah. You just moved to a beautiful new space in Galloway Village that's empty.
Yeah. It was a tough call, but early on, we took it 2 weeks at a time. We would post an update with the team. We would talk it out. You know, here's what we're thinking. We don't know what to expect. It seems like no one really knows what to expect. And so we're gonna take it 2 weeks at a time and see what happens. More recently, we were pushing it back. You know, I think I don't know how many times it was, but it was a lot of times pushing it back 2 weeks. And we were talking as a leadership team and what truly would allow us to go back. Well, a treatment that's effective or a vaccine. Those are the 2 things that would make us comfortable going back to the office. And so we just said, look, that we don't know when that timeline will be. The experts don't know when that timeline will be. So we just have to say, you know, for the foreseeable future, we are going to remain remote. And coming out of this, you know, you mentioned our office. We put a lot of effort, time, money into making that place a great place to go in and work. Going back, we will likely be remote first. So we will pivot to the office is there. It's there for client meetings, but we will equip every room with the ability for people to call in through Zoom and every meeting to be able to be managed remote. And obviously that opens up a talent and workforce for us across the country. But we think we can adapt the way we work really effectively going back into the workplace when we get there.
Okay. You know, so what has this meant, putting mental health at the forefront and supporting mental health? What has that meant to your staff and your leadership? You know, what do they say to you about working at Mostly Serious?
Yeah. I think it's less about what they say and more about what they do. And so as we transition to remote, everyone was checking in on each other. Everyone, you know, you mentioned it was probably hard for me not having that person to check in on me. The whole team was checking in on me. And so when you install these things and you allow people to help direct them and maintain them, what you get is that true understanding of why is mental health important and how do we treat it at Mostly Serious. And so I think the greatest benefit is that everyone's involved in this and everyone understands it and we're all there for each other. Our director of engineering started hosting Zoom yoga. She's a yoga instructor. And so all these things started popping up. There were just employees taking care of other employees and thinking about, this is really hard for me. How could I help this be a little easier for somebody else? And so I think the greatest benefit is installing this into the organization and having everybody look to it when things get hard.
Mm-hmm. So by you kind of establishing that as part of your culture and part of your policy, that it seemed like it opened the door and gave permission to employees to come up with their own ideas.
Yeah. And I think I'm a big, you know, run a bunch of experiments, see what works, see what doesn't. I know every business owner isn't like that, but if you can wait it out and see what works and what doesn't work, I've found that it is very shocking what tends to be profitable versus what tends to be unprofitable, and allowing people to have a little free reign to try these things that are incredibly difficult to measure. If the profitability is going up, it makes a lot of sense to give them a little more freedom to try these things.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Jared. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine.
So we'll send it back to Jennifer Jackson.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Jared. I want to give a big shout out of appreciation to all who joined us this morning and to all of our panelists. You may know that this was the second of 6 scheduled forum discussions for the growth survey, and there's lots still to talk about. We will meet again in much the same manner on August 26th. I hope you'll join us for that discussion. I also want to give a big shout out and thank you to our forum sponsors, Toth & Associates, H Design, Bryan Properties, and Allis Acres Arney. And a big thank you